What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are continuing our look at the 2022 schedules for each team and also giving an early projected record for each team. Alabama is up next. If you're an Alabama fan, please help us out and subscribe to our Alabama channel. I'll post a card here that should pop up on your screen. But yeah, we did Georgia yesterday. Moving on to Alabama today. We will go through and preview the schedules and then again give you a very early projected record for each team. Not a prediction, but just a projection based off of really how tough the schedule is this upcoming season. Alabama had a tougher schedule in 2021 than it has in recent years. Not really because the actual schedule was tougher, but just because the teams that they played have gotten better, like Tennessee, like Arkansas. And they did have to play Florida out of the SEC East. They played Miami in the non-conference. We thought that was going to be maybe a little bit tougher than it was. Of course, Alabama rolled in that game. And then they did have Florida there in week 3 on the road, a game that wound up being pretty close. Of course, Florida kind of went off the rails from there. Their season did not go all that well. But at that time, they seemed like a pretty good football team. They played Ole Miss at home, were really impressive in that game. Texas A&M tripped them up. That was the first time that Alabama lost to a former assistant, of course, and it was a big loss, we thought at the time, but at the end of the day, it really didn't mean anything. Alabama still won out. They still won the SEC championship. They were still the #1 seed in the college football playoff, so that loss really didn't hurt them at all. If anything, it might have kind of woke them up a little bit. It might have been a good thing. They played Mississippi State after that on the road, were really impressive in that game. Tennessee and that offense gave them a little bit of trouble, but they pulled away in that game. LSU wound up being a close game, and that's when LSU was kind of the first team to really expose that offensive line. They were blitzing like crazy. Arkansas got after Bryce Young a little bit. Auburn played them really well, but give LSU some credit for what they were able to do on defense and keeping that game close. But Alabama was able to get the win there, beat Arkansas in a close one, beat Auburn in a close one, and then, of course, go on to win the SEC and come one win away from a national championship when they lost the rematch to Georgia. So let's fast forward to 2022, and here is the schedule. Before we kind of break it down game by game, let's take a look at who they play outside of their division, because, of course, they will play every team in the SEC West. So outside of the SEC West, this is who Alabama plays. In the non-conference, they'll play Utah State. They will play on the road at Texas, which is really interesting. ULM and Austin Peay. So obviously ULM and Austin Peay going to be easy wins. But Texas on the road, possibly a challenge for Alabama. And probably not. I think the Texas offense maybe can challenge the Tide, and they'll be able to score some points. But overall, Alabama is just so much above Texas right now as a program. And with everything they have coming back, that shouldn't be too big of a test. But it'll be interesting. Steve Sarkisian there at Texas, of course, was just at Alabama a couple years ago. So that is definitely an interesting matchup there. And Utah State's not a team that you're just going to go in there and roll over. I haven't looked in depth at Utah State to see what all they have coming back this year, but they were pretty good last year. So that could be a game where it's not a 50-point win, but Alabama, should still be clear favorites. And they get a pretty good draw out of the SEC East. Of course, they play Tennessee every year, but their other opponent will be Vanderbilt. So now that Tennessee is finally looking pretty good and they have to play them on the road, their other SEC East opponent is Vanderbilt. So that works out pretty well for Alabama. They'll open up with that game against Utah State, and then they'll play on the road at Texas, ULM there, and Vanderbilt. So the month of September, not too tough for Alabama. Texas will be their toughest game, but like I said, if you just look at these teams and these programs, Alabama is so much above Texas right now, even on the road. It's hard to see Alabama really being challenged in that game. It could be a good one, though. We'll see. I don't think it'll be similar to Utah State. It's not going to be a 50-point win. It could be. It's Alabama, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Texas will score some points, and it'll be an entertaining game. But still, Alabama should be able to cruise through the month of September. The month of October, a little bit tougher. They'll play Arkansas on the road. Arkansas, again, played Alabama tough last year. It's a team with a lot coming back, a lot of preseason expectations, I think, for Arkansas this year. Probably a preseason top 15 team. Then they'll play Texas A&M after that. Of course, revenge will be on the minds of Alabama in this one. So I think if I'm an Alabama fan, I feel pretty good about that game. It might be one of the tougher teams that you play, but playing at home, revenge game, you got to like Alabama's chances in that one. Tennessee, after that on the road, could be a challenge there. The Vols should have a good offense with Hendon Hooker back at quarterback, and we know what they did last year against Alabama. So we'll see if Tennessee can maybe close the deal and keep that game close in the fourth quarter this time. And then Mississippi State there to close out the month of October. I really haven't given Alabama much trouble in recent years. So it's really about that 3-game stretch. Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. That's the toughest 3-game stretch, I think, on this schedule. And so you'll learn a lot about Alabama right there in the middle of the season, right there in the month of October. Going into November, they'll have a bye week before playing LSU. Who knows what LSU is going to look like? Totally different team, new coaching staff. It is on the road, though. It is Death Valley, so you never know. But after a bye week, that's a good spot for a bye week there before playing LSU, because it's on the road at LSU, and then it's on the road at Ole Miss. So back-to-back road games. Hey, we're talking back-to-back. That might be the toughest back-to-back for Alabama. The only back-to-back road games on the schedule with LSU and then Ole Miss. Ole Miss's offense you would expect to be pretty good, so that could be an entertaining game there. Austin Peay and then Auburn at the end of the season at home. It seems like the Iron Bowl is always a really, really close, dramatic game, or it's a blowout for Alabama. And playing at home this year with this team, you might lean more towards the blowout for Alabama this time, as they will, again, close things out with the Iron Bowl. Overall schedule, it's not too bad. You get to play Vanderbilt out of the East. Texas is the big non-conference game that I don't think is going to be too tough for them. But a tough stretch there in October, and then a tough back-to-back in November with LSU and Ole Miss on the road back-to-back. But still a schedule that I think leads Alabama to still be the favorite in the SEC West. Here are the projections for Alabama from 2021. They were 11-1 in the regular season, and we're just looking at the 12 regular season games in this video. Our projection had them at 11-1. That's what the numbers told us. I predicted them to go 12-0. I didn't see them losing a game. Yes, the odds would say that they would lose a game because they had a lot of tough games, and you saw that during the season, a lot of close games. But when it came down to each individual game, I just could not pick a team to beat them last year. Texas A&M was able to do that. Although if you look at the entire season, Alabama was a better team than Texas A&M. But that's what happens. The odds catch up to you, and a lot of times you're going to lose a game like that. You're going to lose one game when you have a schedule like that, and that's how it played out. But I didn't pull the trigger on a loss. I did have them going 12-0, but our projection did have them at 11-1, where we just looked at all the numbers, which we're about to do in just a second. The FBI projected them to go 11.1 and 1.6. Now, that includes the SEC championship. So if you say they were giving them maybe a 50-50 chance in the SEC championship, then really they were projecting them to have about 10.6 wins last season, about 10.5 wins. And then the over-under for them was at 11.5. And so, based on my prediction, I would have been over that, and I would have missed it. Our projection, though, would have been right on the money at 11-1. So let's see what the projection says about this team in 2022, an Alabama team that is absolutely loaded coming back. They should be even better than they were last year. But the schedule's a little bit tricky. They've got some tough games on the road. So let's just take a look at it. Here is that schedule. And when you try to do this projection, you look at Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, 5 road games. Is the projection going to say that Alabama can win all of those games? I mean, that's going to be pretty tough. This is the key that we're using this year. I did change it up a little bit from how we did it last year. So games that are in that 40 to 60% range, those are the 50-50 games basically. We'll leave those in the white. If it's less than a 19% chance or less, it's going to be in the red. 20 to 29% in orange, 30 to 39% in yellow, 61 to 70% in purple, 71 to 80% in blue. And then if it's 81% or higher, then it will be there in the green. So that's the scale that we'll be using. And when you start breaking this thing down, we start with a team like this, we're always going to start with the green, the 81% chance or higher. So over 80%. And I think you've got several games here. You've got Utah State, not a bad group of 5 team, but Alabama has no business losing to them. ULM, Vanderbilt, easy win. Mississippi State hasn't really shown that they can compete with Alabama in recent years. The game is in Tuscaloosa. Austin Peay, and even Auburn. I know it's the Iron Bowl, and some people are going to say, Hold on, you cannot say that Alabama has an 80% chance or higher, over 80% chance to beat Alabama because it's the Iron Bowl. But if you just look at these two teams and you look at where this game is going to be played, there's no real reason to think that Auburn is going to have a chance to win this game. Now, they could surprise, and we're a long ways away from the start of the season, so I could maybe change my thoughts on this game. But looking at it right now, it's just not a game that I see Alabama having really any realistic chance of losing. I mean, a slight chance, yes. Obviously, it's closer to 80% than it is 100% for Alabama, whereas, Austin Peay, ULM, they're going to be closer to 100%. But I think you can feel confident enough with these 6 games to say that Alabama is going to win these 6 games. It would be a shock if they were to lose any of these games. So we go to the next group here. We're going to go to the blue, 71 to 80%. And that's the rest of the schedule for me. I think the rest of the schedule falls in that category. Texas, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, and Ole Miss. With Texas, I was actually close to putting them in the green, as bad as they were last year. But they're going to have some firepower on offense. The game is on the road. There is just enough there to where I'm going to put this in the blue. But I think it's closer to 80% than it is to 70%. I feel pretty good about Alabama in this game. Arkansas is a tricky game. It's on the road. Arkansas played them tough last year. It's going to be a good team again this year. That could be their Texas A&M game in 2022. So don't sleep on that one. Texas A&M might have the talent to kind of compete with Alabama, but still, with the fact that it's in Tuscaloosa and the fact that Alabama lost to them last year, and it's a revenge game, and how Nick Saban does in these revenge games, it's hard to see Alabama losing that game. Tennessee could challenge them a little bit. I just don't think they're quite there yet. LSU, Death Valley. This is probably the biggest wild card because we don't know how good LSU is going to be. We don't even know what the roster is going to look like when it comes to the start of the season. So that one is kind of tough to figure out where it should be. Possible that game should be in the purple, but it's also possible that it could wind up in the green. So that's why I'm just going to leave that in this blue category. And then Ole Miss, the same thing. They're in the blue. A team that's going to have an offense that can score some points, kind of like with Texas. Ole Miss, I think, is going to be better than Texas. So that might be their toughest game of the season, that game against Ole Miss on the road. So some tricky games, just like last year, but still games that if you just look at the percentages, Alabama should win these games. They're going to be probably a touchdown favorite in all of these games. So that's why I'm going to put them all in the blue. So then when you do the projection for Alabama, it actually comes out to 10.5 wins. So they come out to 10.5 wins when you average out these numbers. And what we're doing here is we're counting the green games as wins, going 100% on those. And then the blue ones are going to be averaged out as 75%. The purple would be 65%. The white would be 50-50 games. So when you do that and you average out these games at 75%, it comes out 10.5 wins. But I don't do half games for my projections. So the way I'm going to look at this is I'm going to say, when you look at these 6 games that are in the blue, are they closer to 80% or are they closer to 70%? Because it was right in the middle at 10.5 wins. I think it's closer to 80%, and I just don't see this team losing 2 games. I think the projection for Alabama should be at 11-1. Now, you could say 10-2 if you want to go the other way, but between 10-2 and 11-1, that's the projection for Alabama. So very similar to what it was last year. But it's similar for me looking at the schedule. Yeah, I could see them possibly losing a game, but when it comes down to each individual game, do you really, just think about it. Alabama, Texas. Do we really see Texas winning that game? No. Arkansas, probably not. Texas A&M, no. Tennessee, probably not. LSU, no. Ole Miss, probably not. So you don't really, when you kind of narrow it down, it's hard to say that there's a game that you feel confident that Alabama might lose. And so I don't want to give away my predictions, but we might do the same thing we did last year and have this team actually predicted to go 12-0. But the projection, based off of a schedule that's pretty tough, a lot of tricky road games, the projection does come out to be 11-1 for Alabama, and actually 10.5 wins was the exact projection. But we're going to go 11-1. That's the projected record, the very early projected record for Alabama in 2022.